I stood there, gripping the rusted fence post like it was the only thing keeping me upright. A white sold sign flapped in the breeze, nailed to the tree my grandfather planted the day I was born. The same tree I carved my name into when I was 10. The same tree whose roots I used to trip over when I ran barefoot down the sloped field behind our house. Now, it didn't belong to me. "It's just land," my cousin Mark had said, not even looking me in the eye. We did what was best for the family. Family. They didn't even tell me. I found out from a neighbor's Facebook post showing a real estate deal closing at the courthouse. My name wasn't mentioned. Not once. I didn't speak. I didn't scream or cry. I just walked the perimeter one last time, my boots sinking into the familiar red dirt. My hands ran across the splintered wood of the old barn door. They took my land. They took my bloodline. But I wasn't planning on taking it back.
No.
I'd take something they couldn't replant. Their name. Their standing. Their reputation. My name is Ava Carter.
I was born on this land.
Blood on it. Buried pets beneath its trees. Whispered my secrets into its breeze. That land wasn't just property. It was a story. My story. And my family's too, though they didn't treat it like one. Carter Farm sat on 32 acres of red clay soil just outside of Livingston, Georgia. You'd miss it if you blinked on the highway, a sagging fence line, a 2-story white farmhouse with green shutters faded to gray. But for me, that land was holy ground. It was the one place where things made sense. My grandfather, Henry Carter, bought it in 1957 after returning from Korea. Said he wanted a place where the sun still rises slow and nobody tells you what to do with your dirt. He built the house with his hands, raised 4 kids, and planted pecan trees in the front yard that still bloomed like they knew him. I was his first grandchild. I used to ride on his shoulders through the rows, pretending we were on horseback charging into some wild frontier. My earliest memory is helping him feed the chickens. I was maybe 4. I dropped the feed bucket, and corn scattered like confetti across the ground. I started crying, thinking I'd ruined everything. He crouched next to me and said, "Sugar, this land forgives every honest mistake." That line stuck with me. But not everyone who grew up on that soil treated it with reverence. My Uncle Gerald saw it as a burden. My Aunt Lynn saw it as a resource to extract. And my cousin Mark? He saw it as leverage. After Granddad passed, the deed transferred jointly to all 4 of his kids. My mama, Gerald, Lynn, and their baby brother Nathan. Nathan died young. Never had kids. Mama stayed. She and I took care of Granddad until the very end. We washed his sheets, turned him when he couldn't move, and buried him beneath the cottonwood on the north side of the field. No one else showed up to help. But when the will was read, all 4 siblings got equal shares. That was the start of it. I didn't argue.
Not then.
I told myself, it's fine. We're family. No one's gonna do anything crazy. But families don't always protect what matters. Growing up, I was the responsible one. The one who skipped parties to help Mama can peaches. The one who drove Granddad to his dialysis appointments. I never asked for anything in return. Not praise. Not money. Not even gratitude. Mark, on the other hand, was the family's golden boy. Even when he flunked out of college twice, they still called him the smart one. When he started a landscaping business and borrowed $18,000 from Uncle Gerald to get equipment, no one batted an eye when he never paid it back. Meanwhile, I was working 2 jobs just to keep up with the property taxes. Mama was getting sicker. Her arthritis made it hard to move. So I handled the maintenance, the bills, the land surveys. All of it. When I tried to bring up formalizing my role, getting some legal responsibility, at least partial ownership since I was the only one caring for it, Aunt Lynn brushed it off. "It's not that deep, Ava," she said. "It's just land. You don't need a title for something you're already living on." That line hit harder than she knew. Because it wasn't just land. It was our legacy. But no one saw it that way, not really. Holidays were the worst. Every Thanksgiving, they showed up for pictures and pie. Mark would drive up in a new truck, tell me what I ought to be doing with the field. Lynn would bring store-bought pies and criticize my sweet tea for being too strong. And Gerald, he mostly sat in the corner, checking sports scores on his phone and bragging about his latest real estate flip. Then they'd leave.
Just like that.
Leave me and Mama with the dishes and the silence. One year, I remember asking Aunt Lynn if she'd help cover the well pump repair. It had gone out, and we didn't have water for days. She paused, sipped her wine, and said, "I'm not liquid right now, Ava. Maybe try GoFundMe." I felt my face burn, but I nodded. Always nodded. That's what I did. Be the good one. The reliable one. The invisible one. It got worse when Mama died. I thought maybe, just maybe, someone would show up and say, "We'll help now, Ava." But no one did. Gerald sent flowers. Lynn came late to the funeral. Mark didn't come at all. He texted me, "Can't make it.
Got a client meeting."
Hope you're okay." I sat on the porch that night, alone, staring at the dark field. Fireflies flickered like tiny ghosts. The house was too quiet. I'd never felt that kind of hollow before. But I stayed. I paid the bills. I mowed the fields. I patched the roof after a spring storm split the old pecan tree.
And they?
They sold their shares to Mark behind my back. He called it consolidation. Said it was easier to manage that way. That he was doing the family a favor. But when I asked if I could buy and help manage the land with him, he said no. "Business is business," he said. "You can still live there for now." For now. He shrugged. "Just depends what we decide." That's when I felt it. The quiet shift inside me. Like a door closing. I had sacrificed for these people. Bent myself backwards. But to them, I was just background. Free labor. Sentimental clutter. They didn't see me. And when people don't see you, they don't think twice about stealing from you. That land was the only thing I had left. And now, piece by piece, they were carving me out of it. But here's the thing they forgot. I was the land. I knew every inch of it. Every creek, every hawk's nest, every spot where wild mint grew after rain. It lived in my blood. My bones. They could sign papers. They could cash checks. But they couldn't erase what I knew. And I was about to make sure the whole damn town knew it too. 3 weeks after I found out the land was sold, the papers arrived. An envelope slid through the mail, slot like a ghost. No return address. No note. Just a folded letter from a law office downtown saying I had 30 days to vacate. "Your residency is no longer protected under any co-ownership clause," it read. "The new landowner reserves the right to repurpose, resell, or develop the property as seen fit." I stood there in the kitchen, the letter shaking in my hands. Outside, the sun spilled across the fields. The light looked the same, but everything underneath it had changed. I called Mark. He didn't pick up. I texted him, "You're evicting me from my own family's land?" A bubble appeared. He was typing. Then it disappeared. No reply. A few days later, I went into town to confront him. I waited outside his landscaping office, a sleek brick building with solar panels and a receptionist who wore heels that cost more than my monthly water bill. He walked out with his designer sunglasses perched on his forehead, laughing with a couple of contractors. When he saw me, his smile flickered. "Didn't expect you here," he said, fake pleasant. "You sold it," I said. "You sold our land." "It's not your land, Ava," he replied, like he was correcting grammar. "I lived there. I kept it alive." "Look, don't take this personal."
"It's just logistics," he said.
"You can't sit on that much acreage forever. It's not efficient. The buyer's a developer. They'll turn it into something that actually makes money." I felt like my ribcage was caving in. He lowered his voice. "I told you you can stay a little longer. Just don't make this messy."
Messy.
That word echoed in my chest.
I didn't yell.
I didn't argue. I turned around and walked away, my boots clicking against the polished sidewalk. That night, I made a list of everything I needed to pack. But when I walked through the house with empty boxes, I couldn't fill a single one. Every item had a story. The mason jar on the windowsill? Granddad used to collect fireflies in it. The quilt on Mama's bed? She sewed it from scraps of her high school dresses. How do you box up ghosts? A week later, I got a second letter, this time from the developer. They were planning to tear down the house, build a gated community for upscale retirees, with artificial turf, concrete walking trails, and a fitness center where my grandfather's workshop once stood. They attached a rendering. It showed sun-bleached sidewalks and cookie-cutter homes in pastels. My last name wasn't anywhere on it. Neither was a single tree. The next time I saw Aunt Lynn was at the farmer's market. She was buying fancy jams and pretending she didn't see me. I walked right up to her. "You signed your rights away?" I asked. She flinched like I'd cursed at her. She sighed. "Ava, honey, the land wasn't working. Nobody was farming. Nobody was paying rent. I was living there." "You're not a kid anymore," she snapped, then softened. "Maybe this is a good thing. You can start over. Let go." Let go? Let go of soil that held my family's bones? Of the cedar post where I scratched Ava 97 with a nail? Of the field where I buried Mama's ashes? Start over?
No.
That's when I stopped asking for space and started planning something else. It started small, a trip to the courthouse. I requested copies of every deed, every sale, every tax receipt from the last 20 years. I cross-checked dates, noticed mismatched signatures, missing notary stamps. There were loopholes, so many that they could hang a rope through. And in one line I saw it. All current tenants have been notified and given consent. Except they hadn't. I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't received notice. But somehow my name had been forged. I took it to a lawyer, Rebecca Holloway, a small-town attorney with a sharp tongue and sharper memory. She looked over the documents and whistled. "Someone's playing sloppy and dirty." "Can I stop the sale?" I asked. She shook her head. "Not this late. But you can contest the process, especially if there's fraud." "And if I win?" She leaned forward. "They'll lose credibility. Maybe even licenses. You could burn their names down to the soil." I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Let them think I was sulking in silence. Let them plan their ribbon-cutting ceremony and glossy Instagram posts. I waited, collected, built my timeline, found witnesses, old neighbors, retired county clerks, even the notary whose stamp was allegedly on my signature. She confirmed it wasn't hers. I wasn't chasing justice anymore. I was lighting the match. One night, I got a voicemail from Mark. "Hey, heard you've been snooping around the courthouse. We really don't want this to get ugly, Ava. Let's just be adults about it, okay?" He was scared. Not sorry. Scared. That was enough fuel to keep going. The day the story broke, I wasn't even in town. I'd given everything to a local reporter named Jackie Rhodes, an old friend from high school who now ran an independent blog about land rights and corruption. She published the full story. Family land sold under fraudulent signature. Woman speaks out. My photo was there, standing beside the oak tree, arms crossed, jaw set. The article went viral in town within hours. The comment section exploded. She kept that land alive. They forged her signature? Disgusting. We know the Carters. This is shameful. By sundown, the developer had locked their social media pages. Mark's company got dozens of one-star reviews. And Aunt Lynn? She texted me. "Can we talk privately? This is spiraling." I didn't reply. They thought I was just some quiet farm girl. Thought I'd cry, pack up, disappear. But I stayed. I waited. I turned the thing they valued most, their polished image, into dust. They took my land. But I was taking their name. After the article broke and the town exploded with gossip, I didn't make a single post. No follow-up. No press interview. No dramatic Facebook status. Just silence. Let them talk. Let them guess. I had nothing more to prove, and everything to build. I packed up the farmhouse slowly. Not out of sadness. I had already grieved that place. I'd wept on its floors, raged in its fields, and buried more than memories there. I was done bleeding for it. I kept only what mattered. Mama's quilt, Granddad's hat, a box of seed jars labeled in his handwriting, and the deed copies Rebecca had helped me photocopy. Everything else, the dishes, the rusted tools, the broken porch swing, I left behind. I wasn't taking their mess with me. By the time the new owners came to break ground, I was already gone. No goodbye. No notice. No forwarding address. I changed my number. Deleted all my old social media accounts. Even left my job at the local co-op and started freelancing online under a new alias. It was like I evaporated. And I loved it. For the first time in my life, no one could find me. No one expected anything. No one could guilt me into showing up to clean up a mess they made. I wasn't the family doormat anymore. I wasn't the overlooked cousin. I wasn't the dependable granddaughter. I was just Ava. And I was finally free. I moved into a tiny cabin 3 hours north, tucked deep into the Smoky Mountains. It didn't have cell service, and the road in was barely gravel. But the well ran deep, the windows caught the morning fog, and the birds woke me up better than any alarm ever did. I didn't buy it to escape. I bought it to listen, to rebuild my soul, plank by plank. At first, I didn't know what to do with the quiet. I'd spent my entire life reacting to needs, to emergencies, to guilt trips. Now there was stillness, and I was terrified of it. But slowly, it stopped being silence. It became space.
Space to write. Space to breathe.
Space to become someone I wasn't allowed to be when I was constantly needed. I started a journal. Every morning, I'd write down one truth I had never spoken out loud. Day 3. They only loved me when I was useful. Day 12. Silence isn't weakness. It's survival. Day 30. I don't owe them access to me. I canceled every automatic payment I used to send my aunt when she couldn't cover her prescriptions. I deleted the shared Google Calendar I used to keep track of everyone's birthdays and reminders. I blocked their emails. Not out of spite. Out of self-preservation. This was my season of subtraction. Of pruning dead branches. And God, it felt good. Word got around eventually that I'd disappeared. Jackie, the journalist who broke the story, told me they were calling her, asking if she knew where I was. "They think I'm hiding you," she said, laughing. I told them I don't hide warriors. I just tell their stories. Even that felt surreal. Warrior? I never thought of myself that way. But maybe silence was a kind of armor. Maybe distance was a kind of sword. One morning, a letter arrived at my new cabin. No return address. Just my name, handwritten in the corner. I opened it cautiously. It was from Rebecca, my lawyer. Inside was a printout of an online business listing. Carter Soil Consulting, LLC. Founder, Ava Carter. She had filed it for me, pro bono. A gift, her note read. "You know more about that land than any surveyor I've ever met. Use it." I stared at the screen for hours. Couldn't decide whether to cry or laugh. Me? A consultant? I hadn't even finished college. But I had something better. Lived experience. Generational knowledge. The kind of wisdom you only gain from watching a storm flatten a crop and knowing exactly how to help it rise again. So I leaned in. I built a website. Simple, clean, grounded in my voice. I wrote blog posts about rural preservation, ancestral land care, and ethical soil use. I shared quiet photos of creeks and tree rings and root systems. I never named names. Never spilled family business. Just shared truths. And people came. Emails. DMs. Calls from conservation groups. Requests from farmers, urban gardeners, even documentary filmmakers. They didn't care about degrees. They cared about truth. And I had acres of it. I didn't use my family name as leverage. But people figured it out anyway. A journalist wrote a follow-up piece. From dispossessed to defender, Ava Carter's rise from inheritance scandal to land justice icon. I read it once, then archived it. Recognition was never the point. Silence was. Because in silence, I finally got to write my story, not the one they assigned me. One afternoon, while sitting under a hickory tree near my cabin, I wrote this in my journal. For the first time, my silence isn't fear. It's freedom. And I meant it. They took my land. But in doing so, they gave me something else.
Clarity. Power.
A clean break. Let them keep their golf course homes and artificial trails. I was out here growing something real. Something no deed could contain. I didn't have a trust fund. I didn't have high-powered lawyers. But what I did have was memory, long and sharp, and I started to stitch every slight, every shady deal, into one quiet, calculated web. For weeks, I acted like I was moving on. I worked my job at the feed store, smiled at customers, waved at the same neighbors who'd turned a blind eye. But when I came home to my tiny rented trailer behind the gas station, I opened my second life. Folders, screenshots, court records, public land deeds. I learned how to search through county tax audits, cross-reference zoning permits, and trace the shell LLCs Mark and Uncle Travis had set up. It turns out, greed makes people careless. I discovered they hadn't just sold my land. They were flipping multiple parcels using inside information from the planning board. My cousin's wife, Lindsay, worked in the clerk's office and had been quietly leaking data on upcoming infrastructure expansions. They were buying cheap, reselling high, and laundering money through a construction company they barely owned. I printed everything out. I organized it into a neat binder and gave it a name in big block letters. Red Dirt Redemption. That wasn't even the masterstroke. See, Mark was running for a seat on the County Development Council. His platform? Preserve local heritage, protect community land. I laughed so hard I nearly choked. The same man who had stripped his own kin of generational property was now parading around town shaking hands and preaching tradition. But I knew something else. The developers they were selling to? They were violating environmental regulations, burying illegal materials, polluting the stream that ran just a mile past our old barn. I went back and took water samples. I sent them to a lab anonymously. The results were exactly what I'd hoped for. Dangerous contaminants tied to a company that had, wait for it, Mark's name buried in their board of records. It was time to execute. I crafted a well-written anonymous packet and mailed it to every news station from Montgomery to Birmingham. I uploaded the lab results, the business documents, and the conflict of interest ties to a Reddit thread that exploded overnight. Journalists were demanding the poster, asking for more. I stayed quiet. But the real masterpiece? The town hall debate. The night before Mark was scheduled to speak, I signed up for the public comment section under a fake name. When it was my turn, I walked up to that mic, hair pinned back, blazer sharp, voice calm. "My name is Ava Carter," I said. Every head in that room turned. My family once owned land that was taken from me under the table by someone sitting on this very stage. Tonight, I bring truth. And I handed that binder, Red Dirt Redemption, to the moderator. The crowd gasped when they saw the documents. Mark tried to interrupt me, but the moderator said, "Sir, you'll have your turn." I looked Mark dead in the eyes. "You thought you were burying me," I said. "Turns out I was the seed." Mark's face went ghost white under the fluorescent town hall lights. He tried to smile, tried to maintain that slick, all-American charm he always relied on to wriggle out of trouble, but the binder in the moderator's hands was too heavy with truth to ignore. By the end of the meeting, the crowd wasn't clapping for Mark. They were murmuring, whispering, shaking their heads in disbelief. I didn't need them to cheer. Their silence said more. The next morning, the story hit the front page of every local news outlet. Land theft scandal. Candidate implicated in corruption, environmental crimes. And under it, the mugshots of two men who once shared a Sunday roast at my mama's table.
Yes.
Mark and Uncle Travis were arrested. Turns out, those environmental violations carried heavy penalties, especially when they endanger public health. On top of that, an audit of the land transactions proved enough fraudulent activity to bring down a full investigation from the state attorney's office. The county revoked several development permits, halting all their projects. Investors pulled out. Their accounts froze. And the construction company they used for their shady dealings? Dissolved by the end of the week. Uncle Travis tried to call me, left a voicemail crying, saying he didn't know Mark was going that far. I didn't return it. He knew. They both knew. They were just sorry they got caught. But the best moment? It was when I walked into the courthouse for the public ethics hearing. Mark was sitting at the defendant's table, shackled, staring at the floor. When he finally looked up and saw me, he didn't smirk. He didn't scoff. He looked like a man whose entire world had caved in, and it had. I gave my testimony with poise and precision. I wasn't angry. I wasn't yelling. I was just resolute.
Calm. Honest.
I'm not here to ruin anyone, I said. I'm here because they tried to erase my family's name from land we poured our lives into. They thought no one would notice. But I noticed. And I remembered. After the hearing, reporters rushed toward me. I gave one quote. They took my land. I took back my dignity and the truth. Word spread. People I hadn't spoken to in years sent me messages saying they were sorry, that they admired what I'd done. A few even admitted they had once looked the other way when Travis or Mark pulled shady deals, but not anymore. Justice, for once, didn't wear a fancy suit. It wore mud boots and carried a binder. I wasn't done yet. I had already filed a civil lawsuit to reclaim the original value of my land. And the judge? Let's just say, he wasn't too impressed with how the transfer was handled. There was a strong chance restitution would be ordered. But honestly, money wasn't the real win here. The real win was walking through that same town where I once felt small, where people used to pat my head and say, "Poor girl, lost her land," and seeing their eyes meet mine with respect. No more pity, just recognition. They knew I had stood up, alone, against powerful people and exposed them with nothing but grit, truth, and a well-organized plan. And the men who took what was mine? Now they couldn't buy their reputations back at any price. After the dust settled, I stood on the edge of the land they tried to steal, the wind rolling through the dry grass, just like it did when my father taught me how to plant corn with bare hands. It wasn't just soil. It was sacred. And it was mine again. Though the legal case wasn't fully closed, an injunction was in place. Construction halted. All their signs, machines, and fences were removed by court order. One by one, the survey markers disappeared, like the evidence of their arrogance being scrubbed from the earth. The county offered me a settlement, trying to make amends, but I declined the first two. I didn't want hush money. I wanted the truth to stay loud. Eventually, we came to a different agreement, one that involved a public acknowledgement and full restitution of my family's rights to the property. Then I did something nobody saw coming. I announced plans to build a community agricultural learning center on the land. Not condos, not shopping plazas, but a place where young people, especially those from overlooked, forgotten corners like mine, could learn the trade, the history, the value of the land beneath them. I partnered with a nonprofit out of Atlanta that funded youth agricultural programs. Donations poured in, mostly anonymous, though I'm certain some came from folks who once dined with Travis and Mark and now wanted to cleanse their consciences. My uncle's name? Nowhere near the project. I made sure of that. Instead, I named it after my grandmother, the Lula May Soil and Soul Institute. She was the one who taught me how to can peaches, how to water tomatoes just before sunrise, how to listen when the earth whispered its needs. Now, her name would live on, not in shame, but in legacy. We broke ground in the spring. I remember that first morning so clearly, sunlight streaking across the fields as volunteers showed up with shovels, wheelbarrows, and hope. Some were strangers. Some were old classmates. Some were the same people who had once dismissed my family as just sharecroppers' kin. But on that day, they showed up not with pity, but with reverence. I didn't have to say much. The land spoke for me. And as the new foundation took shape, so did my future. I started speaking at town halls and schools. I got invitations to conferences. The local college asked me to guest lecture on land justice. Can you believe that? Me, the girl who once cried in her car because nobody would believe her story. But the biggest shift wasn't external. It was internal. I stopped shrinking. I stopped apologizing. I stopped wondering if maybe I was being too emotional or too stubborn. Because stubborn saved me. Emotion made me fight harder. And belief in my roots, my right to exist, and my ancestors' sacrifices, carried me through the storm. They tried to erase me, but I rebuilt in full color. And from ashes, I rose, not just to reclaim land, but to plant something that would outlive all of us.
Hope. Truth.
Legacy. A year later, I sat under the sycamore tree that had once marked the edge of our farm and watched children harvest their first batch of tomatoes, laughing, barefoot, sun-kissed with innocence. They didn't know the story of the courtroom battles or the sleepless nights. They didn't see the betrayal, the signatures forged behind closed doors, or the tears soaked into pillowcases. And they didn't have to. All they knew was this. This land was theirs to learn from. And that was the greatest revenge of all. Because while Travis Bishop and Mark Denning had vanished from the headlines, their reputations never recovered. Travis had to resign from his own real estate firm when clients pulled out. His name became a liability, whispered about at meetings, never said aloud in public spaces. The man who once walked like he owned the whole town now avoided public events altogether. And Mark? He quietly retired early. Some say the pressure from local ethics boards forced his hand. Others claim his family begged him to step back before more skeletons tumbled out. Whatever the reason, his legacy, once wrapped in shiny brochures and development blueprints, was now coated in disgrace. Even my uncle, the one who sold us out for a sliver of profit, called me one day. He didn't apologize. Not directly. But he did say, "Your grandma would be proud, you know. You didn't just keep the land. You made it matter." I let the silence hang for a second before answering. I always knew it mattered. You just forgot. That call was the last time we spoke. I didn't need reconciliation. I needed peace, and I had finally earned it. One day, during an open house at the Lula May Institute, a woman approached me with tears in her eyes. She introduced herself as one of Travis's former assistants. She said, "I quit the moment I found out what they did. I never knew who you were, but I watched every hearing. And I want you to know, your fight changed more people than you realize." I nodded, speechless. Because it hit me then. This wasn't just about my land. It was about reclaiming the right to be heard. To stand firm when the system tried to fold you in half. To make noise when silence was the expectation. I didn't scream. I didn't riot. I let the truth do the shouting. And in a world full of artificial headlines, twisted PR, and quick cover-ups, the truth is the one thing they couldn't outrun. They wanted to bury me. But I was the seed. And now, the harvest was being shared by a whole new generation. When reporters finally stopped calling and court orders became dusty files in someone's cabinet, I knew I had won. Not just the legal battle, but the moral one. Because I didn't just reclaim my family's land. I reclaimed my family's name. And now, whenever people pass the sign that says Lula May Soil and Soul Institute, they don't see a courtroom loss or a development deal gone wrong. They see legacy. They see strength. They see what happens when one woman refuses to let silence become her inheritance. Just when I thought the dust had finally settled, an envelope arrived, hand-delivered, no return address, just my name in thick black ink. Inside was a letter. It was from Travis Bishop. At first, I thought it was some legal trick, a last attempt to undo what had already been done. But as I read his words, I realized it was something far stranger. "You won," it began. "You beat me not just in court, but in the court of public opinion. You ruined everything I thought I was building. But you were right. I stole what was never mine, and I paid the price. Still, I have one final request." I paused, heart-thudding. A request? From the man who tried to erase my family's legacy? He continued, "I have no name left in this town. No future in development. But I still have capital. A lot of it. And ironically, no one will work with me, except you. If there's any chance you'd consider it, I want to invest in your institute. Silent partner. No involvement. No strings. Just funding. For the kids. For the land. For something that actually matters now." He even offered full transparency, every term in writing, every clause favoring me. A legally binding promise to stay invisible. I folded the letter slowly, staring out the window of the office we'd built with so much sweat, grief, and hope. My instinct screamed no. But another voice, the one that had grown sharper through every battle, told me to think. Could I trust him?
No.
Did I need his money? Also no. But could I use it to expand, to reach further, to plant deeper seeds into the community that now called this place home?
Yes.
So I called an emergency meeting with my board. They were stunned but intrigued. I said, "This isn't about redemption. It's about reclamation, about using their tools to build our vision." After days of debate, careful contract revisions, and endless legal advice, we accepted, on our terms. He wired the full amount into a trust we controlled. His name was nowhere on any document, plaque, or press release. And when the first expansion broke ground, no one knew the silent funder behind it. Except me. People say revenge is best served cold, but I think they're wrong. True revenge is served silently, with grace. It's when your enemies have no choice but to admit your strength, even if it costs them everything. And that's exactly what this was. He didn't deserve my forgiveness, and I didn't offer it. But I did take his check, and I used it to build something he never could. A future rooted in honesty, not exploitation. Funny how life circles back. He took my land. I took his name. And then, with his own wealth, I buried his legacy, under greenhouses, healing centers, and gardens blooming with second chances. That's when I knew this wasn't just my story anymore. It was a movement. And he, like every other man who thought silence could be bought, was nothing more than a footnote. Let them hear this loud and clear. You cannot bury what's rooted in truth. You can take someone's land. You can steal their home, erase their name from maps, strip them of every material tied to their history. But you can't steal spirit. You can't bulldoze legacy. And you sure as hell can't outrun karma when it comes knocking, loud and relentless, at your steel and glass gates. They thought I would vanish. They expected my silence. They underestimated my memory, my family's memory. But I didn't just come back. I rose. I took the lies they spread and shattered them with the weight of proof. I took the whispers they planted and drowned them in thunderous truth. And when they tried to use their money to bury my voice, I used their own wealth to amplify it. Now, when people drive past the land they once tried to privatize and pave, they see something else entirely. They see green fields again. Children learning beneath sunflowers. Elders harvesting herbs their grandparents once grew. A community standing taller than any of their towers. And the bishops? The McKennas? They can't walk into town without the shadow of their disgrace following them like an unpaid debt. They can't host events, buy back their name, or clean their conscience with public donations. Because no donation can scrub the truth. And the truth is, they lost everything trying to break me. And I found everything in reclaiming myself. What they didn't know, what they never saw coming, was that I was never alone. Behind me stood generations. Beside me, a community. Within me, a fire that no eviction notice could extinguish. So, let them tell their stories. Let them spin their false versions behind closed doors. But my story is written in the soil, the roots, the rebirth. In every footstep across the revived land. In every child laughing where silence once echoed. They took my land. I took their reputation. And I gave that land back to something far greater than ownership. I gave it back to purpose.
To people.
To power. And to anyone out there being silenced, sidelined, or stolen from, don't fold. Don't vanish. Don't make yourself small to survive their greed. Because the very thing they fear most is you remembering who you are and refusing to disappear. Make noise. Plant roots. Build louder. Reclaim not just what was taken, but what they never even saw coming. Your legacy. Let them learn you are not for sale. Not for silence. Not for shame. And certainly not for surrender.